He was 12, and the world had already taken too much from him. His name, no one remembered. His parents, gone. His future, a question no one ever asked. All he carried was a wooden shoebox, a brush with frayed bristles, and a heart that refused to stop hoping. He'd grown up near the Belfast docks, sleeping between barrels and ropes, learning to survive by polishing the boots of men who barely noticed him. When the great ship was being built, he'd stand for hours, watching her hull rise like a floating cathedral. The Titanic, she looked like heaven itself, if heaven were made of steel and steam. When a steward offered him a job as a runner, he couldn't believe it. It wasn't much carrying messages, shining shoes, fetching tea for the crew, but to him, it felt like being chosen by fate. For the first time in his life, he had a uniform, a place to belong, and meals that weren't scraps. He'd wake before dawn, polishing shoes until they shone bright enough to reflect his grin. The rich passengers never learned his name. The crew just called him Kid. But every night, when the others slept, he'd slip down to the cargo hold and press his hand to the cold metal wall of the ship, whispering softly, "Take me somewhere better." The days at sea felt endless and alive. He loved to watch the ocean roll by, glittering like melted glass. The air was clean, the sky so wide it made him dizzy. The ship itself felt like a world of stories, children chasing hoops on the promenade deck, elegant women in hats like flowers, engineers wiping sweat from their brows deep below. He worked everywhere between laughter and luxury, between noise and quiet. Sometimes he would peek into the grand staircase and marvel at the crystal chandeliers, imagining what it might feel like to climb those steps, not as a servant, but as a guest. But it wasn't jealousy that filled him, it was wonder. He found beauty even in the sound of the engines, in the rhythm of footsteps, in the way sunlight hit the brass railings. One day, he told himself, "I'll see the world." That night, he couldn't sleep. The stars were so bright, they lit the decks like frost. He pressed his forehead to the glass and whispered to the sea again, "You're beautiful, you know. Don't ever stop moving." He didn't know those would be the last calm hours the world would ever give him. It began with a sound, deep, metallic, wrong. The boy dropped his brush. The floor seemed to tremble. Then came shouting, the kind of shouting that turns blood cold. He rushed toward the third-class corridors, where the noise was loudest. The air felt strange, heavy with panic. People ran barefoot through the hallways, clutching blankets and crying out for loved ones. The smell of seawater, sharp, cold, real, filled the air. He grabbed a rail to steady himself. Water was already slithering down the stairwell, alive and merciless. He started helping instinctively. "This way," he shouted, waving people toward the upper decks. His small voice was almost swallowed by the chaos, but some heard him. A mother with 2 daughters clutched his arm. He led them toward a narrow ladder. He had no plan, no training, just courage, born from kindness. Then he heard it, a baby crying somewhere behind him. A woman struggling, her shawl soaked through, her eyes wild. "Please," she screamed. "Help me, someone help me." He ran back. The floor was slippery, freezing water swirling around his ankles. He helped her lift the baby higher, pressing his shoulder against the door that refused to open. Together, they pushed until it gave way. When they reached the next level, the woman tried to cover the child, but the baby was trembling violently, lips blue, eyes barely open. The boy didn't hesitate. He pulled off his jacket, already damp, and wrapped it around the child's tiny body. "She needs it more than I do," he said quietly. The woman tried to thank him, tears streaking down her face, but he just smiled, that quick, bright grin the crew knew so well. Then he turned back toward the dark hallway he'd come from. He went back down, though no one told him to. The water had reached the ceiling in some parts now. Boxes floated like ghosts. A child's doll drifted past his leg. He moved slowly, methodically, as if searching for something only he could see. His shoebox bumped against his chest, with each step a small, useless weight now, but he couldn't let it go. It was his whole story, the proof that he'd been someone, somewhere. He stopped to catch his breath beside a flickering light. The air smelled of oil and salt. He thought about his mother's lullaby, the one he hadn't heard since he was 6. He mouthed the words, though no one could hear him. Above him, faint and trembling, came the sound of music. The band, still playing, still fighting the inevitable with beauty. He closed his eyes and let the sound fill him. He thought of the woman and her baby. He imagined them reaching a lifeboat. He imagined his jacket keeping her warm. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was his purpose. He looked down at the shoebox, smiled, and set it gently on a floating plank. The brushes inside were dry, the tin of polish still sealed. He touched it once, like saying goodbye to a friend. Then he turned toward the rising black water and walked into it. The next morning, the sea was still too still. The Titanic was gone. All that remained were bits of wood, furniture, and memory. Hours later, when the Carpathia rescued the survivors, a young woman was carried aboard. Her face was pale, her lips blue, but in her arms she held a sleeping baby wrapped in a boy's jacket. She kept whispering, "He saved her. The little boy saved her." No one knew who she meant. His name wasn't on the crew list. He had no family to ask for him, no home waiting on the other side of the ocean. Days later, a sailor found something floating near a broken lifebelt, a wooden shoebox, the words "Shine Bright" scratched faintly on the lid. Inside were brushes, rags, and a single coin. 1 penny, polished so well it caught the sunlight like fire. Years passed, decades. Divers would one day descend into the silent cathedral of rust that lay on the ocean floor, and deep inside a corridor near what used to be the third-class stairs, they found 2 small shoes resting side by side. No body, no name, just the shoes, shining faintly beneath a century of silt. And maybe that was enough. Maybe the sea, in her endless memory, kept his kindness alive in the only way she could, by not letting those shoes fade. Because some lives, though brief, leave behind a light that salt and time cannot erase. A boy who had nothing gave everything. And somewhere, in the quiet beneath the waves, his story still glows a reflection of courage, of love, and of the smallest act that made the greatest difference.